The Old Testament shares terms and ideas with the ancient Near Eastern pagans. Again, we talked a little bit about this last week. This should not be a surprise because there are similarities between the conception of how the world that we experience was made that are shared with Israel's neighbors. We see these terms as metaphorical, the terms that I'm going to cover tonight. We look at them, you know, when the Old Testament says something like that the sky is supported by pillars. Oh, that's just metaphorical. It's just poetic. To us it is, and you know why? Because we have a scientific worldview. That's why. They didn't. They were serious. No ancient person ever scaled a mountain. Do you realize that? Like the tall mountains? Because it takes oxygen, they freeze, I mean, all this kind of special equipment. There's no record that any of them ever did it. Okay, it wasn't until the 15th century that we have, you know, the whole issue resolved of can you sail this way and come out the other, you know, the whole idea about the earth being a globe and all that kind of stuff, that was debated up into the 15th century. We look at that and go, oh, you know, it's just poetic. It is to us. But what I'm going to say is, again, back to my introduction, if you take it literally, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They were serious about it. All these concepts and even some of the terms are part of ancient Near Eastern cosmology. In other words, what I'll show you tonight, the division of the world, what the world looks like in Israelite cosmology, you can find the same descriptions anywhere else. Egypt, Mesopotamia, you know, ancient Syria, the Hittites, whatever. Because this was a common worldview. Now, if we say that Israel knew better through special divine revelation, then we have a problem. Then we have to say that the literature of the pagans, I mean, somehow they knew too. Did God speak to them? Where'd they get that information? I really don't want pagan literature to be in any way even looking inspired. Okay, that's just that opens a real can of worms for inspiration. It's just ground we need to stay away from, and for good reason. It's legitimate to stay away from it. If we let the Bible be what it is, though, we can claim it's unique theologically in what it says about God. But if not, then pagan literature is essentially on the same level. And trust me, you don't want to go there. You want it to be unique. Let's get into it here. Exodus 24. Israelite cosmology has 3 tiers. This is the Ten Commandments passage. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. 3 levels. New Testament is the same. Philippians 2:8, verse 10. So that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. What, like the worms? No. We're going to see what they were thinking here. Revelation 5, heaven, earth, under the earth. It's a 3-tiered cosmology. This is what it would look like. I didn't make this graphic, which is why it looks cool. Okay? Somebody gave this to me because they hated, honestly, at Western, they hated the one I used, and so they gave me this one. This is a 3-tiered cosmology. There's God. We're going to see it in the verses I'll show you that God lives above the vault of heaven, the firmament. And in the firmament you have windows and doors. And you have the earth. We're going to see verses that talk about the ends of the round, flat earth here. Underneath is Sheol. Sheol can be both the grave, and it can also be the underworld. Okay? It's not quite hell, but it's sort of like hell. We can talk a little bit about it. And then underneath that, we have the great deep. These are all scriptural terms that are on this map. This is what an Israelite, an Egyptian would have had different terms, but the same 3-tiered level. Same with the Mesopotamians. Now they have, theologically, they have dramatically different views of what's going on here. Not just who made it, but what's going on. Views of afterlife, the value of humanity. I mean, it's dramatically different. And I've made the comment before, Genesis is about theological messaging. And there are some dramatic differences in what Israel is saying, the Bible is saying, and anything else. So let's take a look at the parts. Waters above and below the heavens. Genesis 1:6, God said, "Let there be an expanse." Some translations have firmament. It's rakia in Hebrew. "In the midst of the waters. And let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse, the rakia, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so." And what was that expanse called? Heaven. The heavens, the sky, Shemayim in Hebrew. So you have here the sky. Okay, and you have waters above the sky, and of course you've got waters below down here, but then you have the atmospheric heavens as well. Psalm 148 mentions the waters that are above the heavens. That's after the flood. Did you catch that? Because a lot of people want to say, oh, the waters above, they went away with the flood. See, the firmament was this canopy thing, and it was there, and then the flood, it just went away. And no, it wasn't. According to the psalmist, he's still referring to it. Proverbs 8, "When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep." Isn't that interesting? We'll get to that. Circle on the face of the deep. "When he made firm the skies above." Made firm is amatz in Hebrew. It is the same verb for letting a tree grow firm, hard. Ancient cosmology across the board believed that the sky was this dome over the earth, and it was solid. Kind of like the Truman Show. Okay? They believed that the stars were affixed to it. Some of the stars never moved, but other ones did. And the ones that did, this is why the word stars is attributed to the sons of God and to angels in biblical literature. They believed that the stars were animate beings, that they were really divine beings, and then they'd come to earth as angels, but they lived up there. And those were the ones that moved. Why? Because movement shows what? If something moves, it's alive. Okay? Again, they can't take a rocket and go up and check it out. They believe that this is there's a solid expanse over them. Another passage. Job 37, verse 18. "Can you, like him," speaking of Job, drawing the dramatically poor comparison of God and Job. Of course, we know who's going to win there, but "Can you, like him, spread out the skies hard," kazakh, hard as cast metal, mutzak, as a metal mirror. Mutzak is the same word used in the casting of the laver, the tabernacle where they would wash. It's solid. It's also the same terminology used for flint rock. Again, these passages point to the belief that there's a dome, the sky is a dome, and it's solid. And God lives above it, we live below it. Job 22, did I skip one? No, I didn't. "But you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the deep darkness? Thick clouds veil him so that he does not see, and he walks on the vault of heaven." That's where God lives. It's his address. And before we think, oh, that's quaint, how cute. We think that, don't we? If a little child would ask you, where does God live? Up there. Is there something wrong with that answer? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Use it, because there's the sense that God lives off planet. Why? Because he created the earth for us. He doesn't need it. He's independent of it. He transcends it. That's all it is. It's very normal. Amos 9:6, "He builds his upper chambers in the heavens and founds his vault upon the earth." The vault upon the earth. "Who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out in the surface of the earth? The Lord is his name." And Psalm 29, "Lord sits enthroned over the flood." Let's go back here. We talk about the middle tier now, the earth. Here's a God's eye view of the world. If God is sitting above the firmament and looking down at it, what does he see? This is where we get Genesis 1:9. God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place." Waters, plural, one place. How can you get all the waters in one place and then still call them seas? And the dry land appeared. That's how you get it. All the waters, one place, earth, but they're still seas, again, depending on what direction you're coming from or where you're at. Because if you're over here, you're going to call this something sea, and you can't really see what's going on over here. So if you live on the other side, that's another sea. But you got all the seas together. Proverbs 8, when he established the heavens, I was there when he drew a circle on the face of the deep. Circular. He made firm the skies above, so on and so forth. Here's an interesting one. He has inscribed a circle on the face of the waters at the boundary between light and darkness. What's the boundary between light and darkness? Think about it. You all know the answer to this. What's the boundary? Think literally. What's the boundary between light and darkness? Does it get dark here? Does it get light here? Where's the boundary? The horizon. That's the boundary between light and darkness. If this is your view of the world, your horizon is right here. That's where the firmament ends and it meets. It's stopping the waters from going any further. And it goes all the way around, the whole thing. Because if you're on a circular earth, everywhere you look, there's a horizon. The place where light and dark meet. Again, I told you I'm going to be a flaming literalist tonight. I'm going to say that I'm going to take them absolutely at their word. Vault of the heavens, pillars and mountains. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. Oh, that's just metaphor and poetry. Yeah, to us it is. If you ask them, it's like, well, there's that big mountain thing. I mean, that's holding up the sky. Duh. If you don't believe it, go find. I mean, how are you going to find out any different? Obviously we can, but the means to do that isn't with them. 2 Samuel 28, the earth reeled and rocked, the foundations of the heavens trembled and quaked because God was angry. Windows and doors, and that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. Psalm 78, yet he commanded the skies above and opened the doors of heaven. Again, familiar phrases. Pillars under the earth, supporting the earth. Again, look at the language. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. You betcha. It's not Marduk. It's not that silly Ta in Egypt. It's Yahweh who did that. Isn't that amazing? I mean, an Israelite would want you to marvel. He would think you're insane if you didn't. Either that or a pagan. Job 38:4. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? He set the earth on its foundations so that it should never be moved. To him who spread out the earth above the waters. Again, think of the circle with the earth in the middle. For his steadfast love endures forever. Sheol, the last level. Sheol is a Hebrew word. In the ESV, I think in most cases they just have Sheol. It's Sheol in Hebrew. It can mean the hole that they just dug to put you in when you're dead. Or it can mean the underworld. Okay. I said the very first week, we have this idea that hell, the underworld, is down there. Where do we get that? We get that from the Old Testament. Okay, that's just, do you think hell has a latitude and a longitude? Does it have an address? I mean, could you put it into your GPS and it would take you there? I mean, it doesn't have latitude and longitude. These are what are called cosmic geographical terms. Heaven is where God is. It doesn't have a latitude and a longitude. But if you try to describe it, you're forced, because you live and you're limited by space and time, you're forced to use geographical language. Over there, up there, down here. You know, he passed over what? Like, would I stumble on it if I came across? I mean, you know, we use this language today. And we're forced to, because we are not inhabitants of a non-physical reality. We're trapped into using this language about a place that doesn't have locality that our bodies can identify with. That's why we need new bodies, different bodies. Because if it's this one, we ain't getting there. Okay? We're just trapped. This is our existence. And they have the same problem in the Old Testament. Job 26:5, the dead, the word is Rephaim, tremble under the waters. The Rephaim were not so nice inhabitants of the underworld. Tremble under the waters. Sheol is under the waters. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. Abaddon is another word. Again, that word comes up in Revelation for the destroyer, the pit. Right? Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades, the Rephaim, to greet you, all who were leaders of the earth. It raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nations. Everyone righteous or wicked goes to Sheol. Everybody dies. Psalm 89, what man can live and never see death? Who can deliver his soul from the power of Sheol? Answer, nobody. Okay. Now the righteous went to Sheol. The hope of the righteous in the Old Testament was that they get to leave at some point to be with the Lord. Jacob goes there. I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning. Hezekiah goes there. I'm consigned to the gates of Sheol for the rest of my years. See, when you went to Sheol, you were still alive. You were dead, but you're alive. You know, kind of like we think today, when people die, they're still alive. You know, we use the same language because that's the language of Scripture. You still exist beyond your physical death. You're still alive, but you're there, you know, some direction. Okay? Hezekiah is saying the same thing. David, certainly, I think he's going to be in heaven, but he goes to Sheol. Cords of Sheol entangled me, snares of death. You know, are you going to praise? Anybody going to praise you in Sheol? The cords of Sheol entangled me. The wicked also go there. They spend their days in prosperity, and in peace they go down to Sheol. Job's kind of ticked about that. They say to God, "Depart from us. We don't desire the knowledge of your ways. What's the Almighty, and why should we serve him? What profit do we get if we pray to him?" They're obviously unbelievers, but they go to Sheol too. Everybody goes to Sheol. The hope is that you get out. Now, that is a very brief overview of Old Testament cosmology. And I'm coming back to this slide, but I think I'd kind of like to go back to, well, some of us won't have the context for it. Let's just end here. There is a passage, if any of you bring it up in Q&A, I have more slides about it, but I'm going to end here, that relates to cosmology that might have popped in your head as far as a question, dealing with the Earth's shape, as it will. But the message I want you to take away again is Genesis is about theological messaging. Just like with our illustration, we spent a long time leading up to the cosmology slides. When you accept the way that the critic frames the debate, you're not going to get very far. But we can parse that because we separate mentally the truth claim, the message, the assertion, the truth assertion being put out, and we immediately contextualize the person's worldview, and even if it's flawed, and if we look at Genesis this way, it doesn't matter that Genesis is, and the rest of the Bible is littered with this kind of cosmological language, because God didn't bother to change the culture. He could have if he wanted to. He didn't care. If he had cared, he would have done it. The only other conclusion is that he couldn't, and then you have a problem with omnipotence. Okay? God doesn't care. I'm coming to these people at this time, in this place. It's second millennium BC. They don't know it's BC yet because Jesus hasn't come. But it's a long time, okay, way, 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 way back. And I'm going to give them a message, and they're going to do the best they can under my influence to express it. I'm going to watch as they write. If they goof up, I'm going to send somebody along, yeah, go fix that. If they didn't quite get it right, somebody will come along and clean that up a little bit. When it gets done with the process, God can look at this thing we call the Bible and say, good job, it's pretty good. I'm satisfied with that. But all of that content is fixed in a particular worldview that we don't have. Okay, we have to let it be what it is. And let God's decision to do it that way settle with us. And my challenge to you is, try it. Okay, if you do that, you don't need to justify it to science. They need to justify why they're criticizing it for not being what it was never intended to be. And that would be an interesting conversation. Don't accept that, the way they articulate the debate. So if you have any questions, we can jump into that. I really have no idea what time it is.